Okay, so you write a very fluffy proposal and it gets accepted, and then you are left with the real world, which is actually doing the project, which is life during your MCSA fellowship. So what I did,
You got the letters wrong.
MSCA. When I joined, it was MCA.
Exactly.
So yes, because it was 2013. What I did is I brought some of the documents from our project, which includes the proposal, contract, statement of work, reports, etc. So I'm going to show some examples of things we did. But instead of presenting this to you, I am going to let me know what to talk about. This is how it works. What are some of the problems that you think when you're doing an MSCA project you face? Also, people online can ask questions too, by the way. Any ideas? Yeah, just share. Okay, so there's one online already. So Lucy is saying you don't reach your goals or you are left behind. Yes. Now I'll show you how. By the way, our project was very successful, I should say, but it had a lot of problems. Starting with the fact that my supervisor disappeared. So that's another risk you might have. But you don't want to know why. But the two things that Lucy said, one is you might not be on time. That is true. What happened with our project, and what I will do is, for example, show you this. This was my project description. So that's my number, that's my institute, that's the number of days my contract, months my contract was, blah, blah, blah. You see at the top, it says start date month 7, right? So when you have the proposal, especially when you have a network proposal, there's like a time that you put on when you start, or there are times that you put on your deliverables. So like the results section, you see there's M12, M18, those are the months.
This is what you put in the Gantt chart as well.
Yeah, there's a Gantt chart too, but usually, like in our case, because we had 12 projects, we also had tables for each. So what happened is we actually started my contract officially started on month 13, not 7. So it just shifts everything. And that can be a problem, but that's not the only case that I guess this happens. Sorry. Another problem, for example, we had some training activities proposed in the proposal as well, where we said a lot of them. So that's the training in the proposal, and it all had months. Month 10, month 15, 22. But we had to start them when we had all of the people, and all of the people were there on month 13. So again, shifted everything. So that can happen. Another thing that she mentioned is you might not achieve all of your goals. That is also correct. Going back to my my kind of section. So this was the description. I already told you the month problem. These were the proposed results. I think the only one I actually delivered is milestone ISI 2, the first one. What happened was actually we started the project and the rest of the stuff were already done by other groups, so the project was kind of obsolete. And that happens because our proposal was submitted 3 times. It got accepted the 3rd time. So like they updated the content, but they didn't update it too much. Like they still wanted to do like a specific thing. But by the time we started, which was 1 year after the project was accepted, a lot of these research things were done. So we actually had to update this. And it's not a hard thing. Like you might start doing your research and you see that the goals you set have to be changed. And in our case, we just had to make sure that the project officer that was assigned to the project agreed with the changes we were making. So we made a lot of changes. We changed, like my whole project changed, but there were other changes in the network, in the goals of the whole network that we had to adjust as well. And it's funny because this is a very obvious risk. It was not in the risk assessment for the proposal. So the risks in the proposal didn't have anything about the fact that your scope, like research might catch up with what you're proposing, which is a very simple thing. And then what do you do when that happens? So we had to kind of come up with a process to solve this as we went with it. Okay, those are two problems. Any other problems you can think of?
So you're doing, or we will be doing interdisciplinary work, research,
Yeah.
but you're working with one person. That you have one sponsor, right? Or do you do I'm sorry, do you do multiple sponsors? Because what if that sponsor ends up being more dogmatic in their discipline than you hope it would be?
So there are different things that can happen. A little bit, it depends on your proposal. So in our case, we were a network. We had this many people involved, which is not easy. But even if you do an IF, an individual fellowship, you might be in an institute and have partner institutes. Okay? So then the problem is, let's say I'll give you a very small example. We were organizing an event as part of our dissemination work, which was the School of Spintronics. We did it in Greece. And I was in charge of organizing this whole thing with the rest of the young people, the researchers. So we put the program together and everything, and we came up with this idea of doing scholarships to help people that are not part of the network be able to get there. So some people in Germany, that person, didn't like it because they wanted to spend the money on other things in their network. Then we had to rely on peer pressure from other people involved to make sure that that one person, which was very hard to work with, would accept our proposal to use money to bring people, for example. And then that scholarship thing itself, it was also an administrative issue because we couldn't actually give people money. So we had to kind of come up with a process of paying vendors directly, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah. Something like that might happen where you have multiple people involved. Another thing that can happen with people on that note, and I wrote them here, people might disappear. It's not there. Yeah. People might disappear. So my supervisor disappeared. He was there for the first year. I think I saw him 4 times, and then he was no longer there due to some family issues, which were very interesting and gossipy. People might have babies, so I was supposed to do a secondment in Finland, but then the supervisor there, they had a baby, so they couldn't host me. So we had to kind of, again, okay, so it's obvious that you might not be able to do one of your secondments, but the problem was that there was no preconceived idea of what happens if you can't do that secondment. Is there like a backup option or something? So we had to actually come up with new secondments for everyone because 2 or 3 people had to do it there. They couldn't do it. One of the companies didn't want to do it.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah.
This is exactly what I meant by risk management. So in 2013, maybe they weren't too interested in that, but nowadays it's much more important that you think about all the risks and that you put the mitigation measures in your proposal.
Yeah, like if you look at mine, it has like a risk assessment, right? But like it's not deep enough.
I mean, it's about your project and not about the project management, right? The environment of the project. So because there are 2 parts to it, right? What will happen in your research and around your research.
And I think one thing to keep in mind also is, other than like babies, another issue is people might actually have personal issues such as depression. So we had one of our network was supposed to have a postdoc. She started, and after 6 months, she disappeared. And we learned that it was because she had a mental breakdown of some sort. Okay. Or one of my colleagues where I worked, he disappeared for a month, and then we found out that he kind of had locked himself in a place because he was stuck on his project, etc. Then me and my boss had to come up with like a way to integrate him back. So things like that can happen. Like if you rely on other people for information, for some of the work, you have to always keep in mind that they might not be able to do it. Something might happen with them. What do you do in that situation? Online, there was one more thing that they said, and they said you might have problems taking care of administrative aspects of the MC, the fellowship. I'll do it that way. Yeah, so whenever you get a fellowship, what's important is to read the contracts as an S, because the Marie-Curie ones are a little bit complicated. You get your contract with your host institute, that's from our project. So it sets what we, like in a project management, you would call the statement of work. So it tells you the scope of things you have to do, right? Then you also get an employment contract, which is different. In my case, it was in Italian, right? And I didn't get the translation. No, but that is not the worst part. It gets worse. So in Canada, if you're teaching and you get a contract, like I teach at the University of Toronto every summer, and I get a contract. I do it every summer. It's under a collective bargaining unit. So like the rules are more or less set, but I still get a contract that is 6 pages, and it's just for 1 month. This contract was that page. That's the contract. So I didn't know how many vacation days I get. No one told me. It took us 3 months to figure it out, actually. Well,
now they give you the contract. Nowadays,
no, all of our network got it except ours. Yeah, it wasn't written though. They explained it to me. It wasn't written in the contract. It refers to like a collective bargaining in Italy, but I mean that document, I don't know. But things like that, or even it gets more complicated because your host, when they sign a contract, it includes something like this, which is for different work programs. The numbers would be different, but the general idea is you have categories of expenses that they need to kind of abide by. So they have to make sure that the first category is your salary, for example. The second one is for your mobility. The third one is for your research, right? So they cannot spend the money that is assigned for your salary on something that is not your salary. But there are gray areas in it where they can spend it on costs that you have for them to hire you. So an employer might have to pay for insurance because you're on the premises. They can remove that from your salary. Guidelines that the European Commission has requires them to actually tell you, because you're the beneficiary of this project, where that money went. In Italy, they didn't do it. Actually, the project officer was in our office twice, and he went and talked to them to add it to our pay stubs, but it wasn't there. But for example, in Germany or in France, our colleagues would get a pay stub which says, before even we come to your salary, we had to deduce this, because of the cost that, for example, you're non-German and you're working in Germany, we have to pay like 300 euros a month because of just that. So that's deducted from your salary, something like that. So those things also come to play. Understanding the finances is a little bit complicated. The other thing is the local laws are different, but also taxation becomes an issue because, let's say I'm from Canada, I'm in Italy, so Italy taxes me, then I still need to do my taxes in Canada because I had income in Canada. And then you need to fill some weird forms that if you don't know, they would tax you again, which happened to me. I'm still waiting for them to pay me back. So it might take several years then for you to get your money back. So understanding those things is also important. And you don't think about it when you're signing the contract, but you should.
You should think about it even when you apply, when you choose your institution. But choose wisely. institution has to be administratively adapt to all these things.
Yeah, just going back to this, and I want to show you some examples of what she talked about. These are, for example, work packages from our project. Okay, so
This is nice.
it's a table. It tells you the organizations involved, because in an IF you still can have partners. So partners might be involved in some work packages. You don't know. But we had months and everything. As like these months, you can adjust them, and that's what we did as we went on. Each of the work packages in our case had a description like this, which was another table, which told the specific objectives of that work package, the specific milestones and deliverables that then were assigned to different people on the projects.
Objectives and deliverables. Very nice. This is how it should look.
So we also had like a graphic that just tried to summarize the whole project. So the idea of training, so part of the ITNs, which is what I did, is training. IF, you still have to do training. So in our case, we broke the training down into two parts: training through research and training for life, which was like courses that we were including in what we were doing. And these were the courses. We actually changed some of these courses later on. Too many. Oh, this? Yeah.
But don't put the same like this in the proposal. Like this.
It was.
Yeah, but
It depends, I think, on the field, because we're a technical field, so we had to show something that is like feasible.
You have the tables as it was before on your previous slide.
Like this.
Like the clear. What are the objectives? What are the associated milestones and deliverables? Plus the calendar.
Yeah, different language. Don't with that like.
Well, that's what we called it.
I like that. I like it.
Yeah. But
So
just like more.
So obviously, I already showed you this, but in our case, because it was a network effort, we had to kind of make sure that these lines connect with the lines that were in the other tables. But we also had, for example, outreach activities. We actually, this is funny again. Of these, I think we only did 5 of it, but we did other things that were outreach. So we did like Pint of Science in Leeds. It's not listed here, but we didn't do all of these. I mean, I don't even know what this one is. No one talked to me about it.
Well, the Marie-Curie ambassadors, this is what you're doing now.
No, the idea there was as part of the project. The project finished 2 years ago.
Yeah, but this is the point. That this is what you should have been doing. This is one of the points that we would be looking for in the project proposal as well. Are you going to participate in the researchers' line? Are you going to participate as a Marie-Curie ambassador at schools? And if you read the guidelines for the project proposal, it is all explained there, right? When you read the whole package, so you will understand what we're talking about.
So we already talked about this fact that you might have different organizations involved. So in my case, I was working there, so I had a contract with them. My boss worked here, so I had to go here every week, like once a week. They wouldn't let me in, although they knew me. So I had to wait for my boss to enter the building, then get a guest card to enter the building, for example. It's like a simple thing that could have been resolved because they were a partner on the project, but it was never resolved. I was registered here for my PhD. They didn't know how ITNs work, although they're in Europe and they're a big university, so it was fun. And here, so this was my department. This was the School of Graduate Studies. They didn't talk to each other, and none of them knew how ITNs work. So we had to kind of train them to understand what we're doing because, for example, we had our own courses, and they wanted me to take additional courses. But we were like, okay, how many courses can I take in 3 years? Things like that can happen. So it's very important to make sure all of the organizations involved understand it and make sure that all of them are on the project. These 2 were not on the project until year 4 when we signed something with them, which enabled me to graduate finally. Otherwise, they wouldn't, like they were creating more problems for us. So that's another administrative issue that can come up. Oh yeah, so I told you that sometimes you have to update your milestones. In our case, we had to do a mid-project review at some point. For an IF, you don't have to, I think, unless you're very long.
You have to do interim report. This is where you inform the commission about all the changes, and then you propose. If you cannot do these activities, you propose other activities.
Yeah. So like we had to propose additional dates. Like this is part of the report. I have the full report, but this is part of the report. So this is like my part, and that was my part. So it tells them what we did generally in that area, but we didn't achieve the goal. So that's why there are additional dates, which we added to just tell them we are working on it and we're going to get to it at a specific time. And you also see there, for example, that there are other organizations involved. For example, I did this, Salamanca did this, which is related to what I do. So we were trying to kind of make sure that they also understand that there are different players involved. It's not like we are not delivering it, it's because we're waiting for something from someone else maybe. Just clarifying those interfaces becomes important. So we talked a lot about taking part in dissemination, but I wanted to also say you have to sometimes go beyond what's in the proposal. So these are some of the dissemination things that we did. So Researchers' Night in Torino, these were the two. This was something we did in Paris. It was not part of the proposal. We were having a network meeting in Paris, and we said, hey, it's good. Like there's a school nearby. Let's go and talk to high school students about magnetism. So we just took some stuff from the physics department in Orsay, and we took it there and we talked to them. You can talk to the radio. Our Italian friends there did that. But we also did this thing where we organized meetings that were open to external people outside of what our network was, using the training budget that we had. And for example, in this case, we actually counted the fact that the organization of the event was done by the researchers that were being trained, like myself, as part of our training. We could, why not? So things like that are also counted as training. You might not think of event organization and management as training, but it's part of one of the skills that you should have. Another thing that is important is to have good ways of keeping records. So in our case, we had, let's see if this works. By the way, this project was after another project with a similar topic, so we actually used some things from our other projects. But we had something like this. This was mine, which we called it Researcher Training and Dissemination Record. So on it, it was updated every 6 months. Kind of, I updated it, then I would share it with my supervisor. But the point of it was we kept track of any meetings that we did, meetings that were kind of about the project, but like additional meetings that we sometimes had to go to just to push the research forward. Any training activities we had, so these are all the courses that we did. We had online courses too. Secondments to different organizations, what did we do at them? So all of this was in a single place, and when it was time for us to report back on what we were doing, we would obviously write a report, but we also included a copy of this for each person to say, okay, like this is just what this person did, separated into specific areas. So if you want to know dissemination, if you want to know publications, you go to the publications area and you can see, okay, they did this many presentations or this many other things. Just to make sure that it's very trackable and easy to read for the poor person that had to review the whole project without knowing anything about it, because our officer also changed every 6 months. So in the end, the fellowship is actually what you make of it. So you write a nice proposal, but a lot of things have to change. As long as you adapt, you should be fine. And that's it.
Right. I'm really sorry. I think we don't have time for questions. Maybe one. Yep,
if you have questions.
Well, yeah.
I have a question regarding what I learned from this presentation is that there are many ways. So what are the languages we should use for the proposal? What are the kind of ways we should consider? Because there are many, like the risk of the research are more predictable. If we've done, for example, interviews, and we know that we might be delayed for certain reasons, but things around supervisors or collaborators, what is the criteria that we should use to, because everything can be a risk.
Everything can be a risk, but like yesterday, I had to submit a proposal for something else with the government, and we also were asked to do a risk assessment. And I was also like, okay, so one risk here that is very obvious in our project is that the scope might expand as we started because of the way that the statement of work was written, for example, right? So I would say the risks that you have, there are two areas. One is a technical risk, which is the one that most researchers would spend most of their time on, which is the thing, for example, in the table that's okay, like, yeah. But the other part is the project management risks, which is risks from a perspective of a project manager. So like from a perspective of project management, you have your scope risk, but you also have your time, your budget risk. Maybe you want to do something and it just costs too much. Maybe it goes beyond the budget, research budget that is assigned to you by the EU. So how do you handle that, right? Or if, let's say, when we said collaborations, you have these collaborators, they might actually want to jump out of a collaboration. So the aim of risk assessment is to just acknowledge that you have thought of it and then show that you have thought of possible ways to mitigate it, whether it's like the easiest thing is just having backup options for different things. But it can be that, okay, like there's a part of a project, if we don't have enough money, we wouldn't do it, right? It can be that. It's very also subjective depending on the project itself. So.
Yeah, but this case actually absolutely focus on the risks that are risky to achieving the result.
There is a good actually method to do it. So when we do risk assessment, we actually say look at the risk from probability and impact, and then you can do a matrix where you say, okay, these risks are low probability, low impact, so I don't care about them because. Exactly. Right? But the ones you want to include in your proposal is the high probability, high impact ones, because then those are the ones that play a very important role. Yep.
I have a more general question about but like who's applying? Who's applying and what do they do after they graduate, after they finish college? 5 years. Us?
You can do different things.
I work for the delegation in Canada in the project. So I'm working for 3 years with Canada relations.
I work with the government of Canada. Different. This is interesting. In our project, so I showed you a picture of this many people invested. There were 12 people, the young ones that are near the project, that were involved and trained here. Of these, none of them stayed in academia. It's not common to stay or not to stay. It depends really on your situation, right? We had people that actually had a complete change of direction. They went on and they're studying to become clergy, actually. After this project, it was really interesting. The physics. We had people that started their own companies. We had people that are trying to still stay in research, trying to find a postdoc. So a lot of things can happen. It's just it's an interesting training experience where you don't have to be stressed about money, and you can kind of try to understand where you want to go and make sure to build bridges in those directions.
How
will say that in more advanced cases, when we're most of us are trying to get academic jobs, that say some of my colleagues who did get postdoctoral fellowships, that was mainly what was happening for people post PhD. It bought them a little bit of extra time, just given the fact that most of us sit on the job market for a couple of years. So yeah, it's a good way if you're trying to land a job back in academia. It also it depends on what your sort of specific mobility is. My opportunities to do continued research were obviously limited because I needed to maintain my visa status within Europe. So I didn't have an immediate work contract, to follow my Marie-Curie fellowship, then I was done. In fact, Marie-Curie was precisely what happened to me. So if you have more mobility to kind of hang for a little while, then you might be able to maybe stitch together additional research projects. It's stressful if you don't start off with your specific needs for yourself, where you feel that that's reliable. So I've found that people who did maybe a 2-year fellowship were either trying to establish a research profile that would have enabled them to apply for additional research funding so that they could carry on in research, or they were just simply trying to buy a bit of extra time so they could find like a permanent contract or renewable contract.
What I also have to say that in Europe, unlike in Canada, you can live your life on the research contract. I lived 20 years on 3 years contract with very good institutions, and I was always paid, and yeah, had fantastic support, but this is what the EU money helped to achieve, so I didn't have to go through the stress of tenure, teaching. I never thought I always did this, but I wanted to do that.
Just to add on to that, and this is a bit of what we were discussing earlier in the first half of the day, is these different research cultures. I will be using reference right. It's these different research cultures between North America and Europe. Europe is investing, and you might have missed out on panel, but it's on it's on Twitter now, live feed, but it also will be on our YouTube channel because we have that recorded. And what you'll see is that Europe has invested quite a bit of money, European Union, quite a bit of money, along with the member states, to improve and to increase brain circulation. So when you ask who is applying for these actions or for these grants, and what do they do after, really there's one keyword here, and it's excellence. Whether it's you have done excellent research, or you have a vision for excellent research, or once you are done, you have the seal of excellence, it all centers in that word. And that can be very scary, it can be very overwhelming, but part of our job here as Euraxis North America, or at many of the Euraxis worldwide hubs, is to facilitate, is to show you that you have a kind of support network in approaching something like this that may be not as easily found or leveraged or navigated in North America or in other countries. And Marie-Curie Alumni Association is absolutely one of these resources, and I'm very, very glad that you had the opportunity to listen and just take a listen of what this offers, because we wouldn't have been able to do this. We haven't been through the process. But as you see, it's quite diverse, whether in the field. You can also see a very similar session to this from last year at the University of Ottawa. They're all also Marie-Curie fellows, but you will hear a completely different story, not in terms of the process, but in terms of the diversity that they're bringing to the table. So I really would encourage you to go to just YouTube ERDAT, University of Ottawa. All right. Well, on that note, please join me in thanking the great Marie-Curie and please do stay around so that we can ask you to maybe record a minute or two of what you've learned and what more you would be interested in learning for when we plan our next event. Thank you so much.
we are abruptly ending because we also have now a chapter meeting.
What is happening at 4? Ah.
Yeah, I don't know
Where are you having the meeting?
We have a meeting in the